The dust hung thick in the air that late summer afternoon in 1887, the kind of dust that coated the tongue and made every breath taste like forgotten earth. The barn on the edge of Harlan Voss's spread hadn't seen a proper cleaning since the war ended, its timbers grayed and sagging under 20 years of prairie wind. Voss himself was a tall, narrow man with eyes the color of spent cartridge brass, always watching, never blinking first. He had ridden out to check the north fence line when he noticed the side door ajar, the chain that usually held it rattling loose against the boards. No horse was missing from the corral. No tools gone from the shed. Yet something felt pulled out of place, like a photograph hung crooked on the wall. Inside, the light slanted through cracks in the loft, striping the hay-strewn floor in thin gold bars. And there she was. A woman lay on her side near the far wall, wrists lashed behind her with rawhide that had bitten deep enough to draw dark lines of blood. Her dress, once pale blue calico, was torn at the shoulder and hem, dirt ground into the fabric until it looked like part of the earth itself. Her hair, the color of wet straw, clung to her face in sweat-soaked strands. She didn't move when Voss's boots scuffed the threshold. Didn't flinch at the creak of the door. For a long moment he stood there, shadow stretching across her like a question mark. Then he stepped closer. Her breathing was shallow, deliberate, the sound of someone who had learned that every gasp cost something. He crouched, close enough to smell the copper tang of blood and the sourness of fierce sweat. Her eyes were open, green, flecked with gold, but they stared through him, through the barn wall, through the years that had brought her to this place. Who did this? His voice was low, gravel dragged over iron. She didn't answer, only swallowed once, the motion painful. Voss reached for the knife at his belt. The blade flashed once in the slanted light as he cut the rawhide. She didn't cry out when the thongs parted, she only flexed her fingers slowly, as though testing whether they still belonged to her. Red welts circled her wrists like bracelets of fire. He offered no hand to help her up. She rose anyway, swaying, knees buckling twice before she found her balance. When she finally looked at him, really looked, something flickered in those green eyes. Not gratitude, recognition. "You're Voss," she said. The words came out cracked. "And you're trespassing on my land, tied like stock." She laughed then, a small, broken sound. "Trespassing. That's rich." He waited. "Name's Suddy Kane," she said. "Or it was. Folks stopped us in it after the first winter I spent with the McAllisters." Voss knew the name. Everyone within 100 miles knew it. The McAllisters ran the biggest outfit south of the Cimarron, cattle, horses, and the kind of influence that made sheriffs look the other way. Harlan McAllister had 3 sons, all of them mean in different ways. The oldest, Caleb, was the one people whispered about when the saloons closed. Suddy kept talking, voice steady now, like she'd rehearsed this in the dark. "They took me from the stage road outside Dodge. Said I looked like I needed a husband. Kept me in the big house for 3 months. Then Caleb decided I wasn't compliant enough." Her gaze drifted to the hay under her feet. "So they brought me here. Their old line shack. Thought no one would hear. Thought the barn would swallow the noise." Voss felt the familiar cold settle in his gut. He had heard stories. Everyone had. But hearing them from the woman who lived them was different. "They didn't just hurt me," she continued. "They made sure I couldn't tell. Not with words, anyway." She touched her throat lightly. "Caleb had a way with a hot iron. Said it was a lesson in silence. Said if I ever spoke his name again, he'd finish what he started." She lifted her chin, showing the scar that ran from just under her jaw down to the hollow of her collarbone, puckered, pink, shaped roughly like the letter M. Voss stared at it a long time. Then he asked the question that mattered most. "How long?" 14 days, she said. "They left water. A bucket. Some jerky. Figured I'd die quiet. Or run and die louder. Either way, they win." He stood up slowly. The barn felt smaller now, the air heavier. "You aim to ride into town?" he asked. "Tell the marshal." She gave him a look that said she'd already considered every door and found them all locked. Marshall's on McAllister's payroll. Half the town is. I'd be dead before sundown tomorrow. Voss turned toward the open door. Outside, the sun had dropped lower, painting the prairie in blood and copper. He thought about his own wife, buried 6 years earlier under a cottonwood because the fever came fast and the doctor came slow. Thought about the empty house that waited for him every night. Thought about the weight of a colt at his hip and the weight of silence on a man's conscience. He walked to the tack room, pulled a spare blanket from the shelf, tossed it to her. Then he went to the stall where his roan stood waiting. Get on, he said. She didn't argue. She climbed into the saddle behind him, arms loose around his waist, body trembling but not from cold. They rode north, away from the McAllister spread, away from the town, toward the breaks where the land folded into canyons and secrets. Night fell hard. Stars came out like scattered buckshot. They didn't speak again until the first gray light touched the horizon. Voss stopped the horse on a ridge overlooking a shallow draw. Below them, the remains of an old soddy squatted beside a dry creek bed, roof half caved, chimney leaning like a drunk. He helped her down. She stood on her own feet now, steadier. This place was mine once, he said. Before the war took the boy who helped me work it. Before the fever took the woman who waited inside. Suddy looked at the ruin. Then back at him. You could have left me in that barn, she said. I could have. Why didn't you? He thought about the scar on her throat. Thought about the way her hands had flexed when the rawhide fell away, like roots searching for soil after a long drought. Because some things, he said, are worse than dying. She nodded once. Then she walked toward the soddy, steps deliberate, as though each one reclaimed a piece of herself. Voss watched her go. He didn't follow. Not yet. Behind him, the barn they had left was already miles away, swallowed by distance and dawn. But the things that happened inside it, the things that left marks deeper than iron and rawhide, those didn't fade with the light. They waited, like a loaded gun in the dark, like a promise kept in silence. And somewhere on the wind, the prairie carried the faint echo of a woman's voice that had finally remembered how to speak its own name.